No a teď vám nabídnu rozhovor prezidenta Petra Pavla, ten byl hostem Christian Amanpour na CNN. Otázky mířily především na pomoc Ukrajině a třeba i na českou iniciativu Munice pro Ukrajinu.
President Pavel, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So you really stood out when you called for, the Europeans, and you were going to organize 1.5 million shells, ammunition for Ukraine. As yet, it has not happened. Where do you stand? Where does Europe stand on what they can provide Ukraine?
Well, this initiative was launched because we realized that Czech Republic and other countries don't have enough own resources on stock to give it to Ukraine. And that's why we started looking elsewhere, wherever this equipment or ammunition was available. And to raise enough money, enough support, we addressed our allies, our partners, to join us in this initiative to acquire as much ammunition for Ukraine as necessary. Up to now, we have identified more than 1 million rounds around the globe. There are other initiatives ongoing, so hopefully they will lead to the provision of necessary equipment to Ukraine on time.
So when you say you've identified, have you procured them? Have you bought them?
So far, we have bought 300,000 rounds. For the remainder, the negotiation is ongoing, and obviously it takes some time with all of the partners who are providing sources, financial resources, as well as with the countries providing the ammunition.
Mr. President, I just want to say a recent report from the EU. Countries don't seem to be buying this stuff together, even though the EU, and I recall, making a big deal about joining forces, buy this ammunition together, support Ukraine. Apparently, the governments have purchased about 350 million pounds worth or euros worth of ammunition via the European Defence Agency. But the agency is offering 1.5 billion, but still it's not being procured. Why not? What's the hold-up?
Well, first, if you identify the ammunition in a country that doesn't wish to be known from quite obvious reasons with regard to their relations to Russia, such a negotiation is quite confidential. So the more nations, the more actors in this endeavor, the worse for the case. That's why we're trying to keep it confidential, to negotiate directly with the smallest possible number of actors.
Okay, but you probably have heard that the Defense Secretary in the United States, Lloyd Austin, has said that Russia is beginning to make incremental gains. It's moving onto the front foot, and it's beginning to, really press its advantage now that, for instance, Ukraine doesn't have the American aid. What how much of a difference will it make for you and your effort and for Ukraine if the House passes this aid bill on Saturday night?
Well, we all hope that this bill will be passed on Saturday, because U.S. assistance, U.S. help to Ukraine cannot be replaced. Europe is doing increasingly more and more. European nations are taking responsibility, but the United States still provide at least 50% of it. So that's why we all count on a right American decision.
So this week, the Prime Minister of your country, the Czech Prime Minister, was meeting with President Biden and also with the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, on this issue. I just want to play a little bit of how he described the situation.
In 1968, I was a little boy. In 1968, I saw Russian tanks in the streets of my town. And I don't want to see this again. So we must continue to support Ukraine as long as possible.
So that was, bringing history to play. And I wonder whether, the Prime Minister got a good answer. Obviously from Biden he did, but from the House. Do you know?
Well, from what I know, that the meeting of our Prime Minister with President Biden and also in the Congress were successful in terms of passing our arguments. Of course, our Prime Minister did not receive any promise because it can't be done. So we all hope that the vote will be good and that the bill will pass on Saturday.
What do you make of some of the senators even, you know, not just the Congress people who are in the sort of Trump, what we call the MAGA group of Trump Republicans in Congress? Senators like J.D. Vance of Ohio, who has been, ever since the Munich Security Conference, essentially making a case that Ukraine doesn't matter.
Well, I believe that Ukraine is equally important for Europe as it is for the United States and the rest of the world, because it's not just about the defense of sovereign country and its territory. It's about the principles. And these principles matter for the United States the same way as for us. If Russia succeeds in Ukraine, then the whole transatlantic community will not be trusted anymore, because we are talking about protecting our values, but we are not doing enough to protect them in practice. Moreover, there are countries watching closely what is going on in Russia. If Russia prevails with its attitude to pushing its interests by force, all countries that are watching will be inspired. Starting with China, with a number of countries in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. I believe that it is crucially important that we all deliver all necessary assistance to Ukraine for it to prevail and to push Russia back.
Mr. President, you have said that it's in China's interest to prolong the status quo war in Ukraine. Do you still feel that, and what do you mean by that?
I mean that for China, the war in Ukraine is an open textbook. China is testing the West's reaction to different situations and arguments. And of course, the longer the war takes, the more influence China gets even in Russia and in a number of other countries. Russia is becoming more and more dependent on China. And that state of things is quite convenient for China. That's why I believe that China doesn't have a direct interest to end up the conflict soon.
Mr. President, you must be seeing these reports that say that Russia is being very successful in its, you know, historic propaganda efforts to sort of twist the intentions and to influence the attentions of American lawmakers and maybe even American people to distance themselves from helping Ukraine.
We have our own experience with Russia, or at that time Soviet Union, but unfortunately for us and for the world, current Russia is not much different from former Soviet Union in pursuing their interests by force. Russian president many times suggested that those who are powerful would do what they can, all the rest will do what they have to. I think we don't want to live in a world where only those who are powerful will design the rules. And that's why we're all trying to maintain rules-based international order, respect to the norms, to UN Charter. That's why we are supporting Ukraine, because this is the world in which we want to live.
And now you can see that there's a whole nother war on our doorstep, potentially Iran, Israel, obviously the war that's been going on in Israel and Gaza. And so I want to ask you to reflect on what happened when allies came to the aid of Israel, to the defense of Israel in the face of an Iranian missile barrage. Israel is not a NATO country, and that was noticed and commented on by the Ukrainian president, who's asking, well, we've been asking you to secure our skies and to help us also defend against these Russian and Iranian, by the way, projectiles. Here's what he said.
Well, after yesterday's attack, I want to ask you a question. Is Israel part of NATO or not? Here is the answer. Israel is not a NATO country. The NATO allies, including NATO countries, have been defending Israel. They showed the Iranian forces that Israel was not alone. And this is a lesson. This is a response to anyone on any continent who says you need to assist Ukraine very carefully so you don't engage NATO countries in the war.
You know, as a former, chief of staff of your armed forces, a former NATO general and senior official, what do you make of that? I mean, there is a double standard, right?
On one hand, I fully understand President Zelensky's frustration. On the other hand, if that Iranian attack was not pushed back, if there was no coordination among a number of actors to prevent serious damage in Israel, I think that was an effort to prevent another war. Because if that attack was not announced upfront, if that attack caused a lot of damage and casualties, we might have seen the outbreak of a new war. And no one wants such a new war to happen in such a difficult environment such as Middle East.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. President, finally, this new war, there was already the war going on between Israel and Gaza. Have these taken significant attention away from defending Ukraine? Or can the alliance do both things at the same time?
I think we don't have a luxury to take the crises one by one. If they happen at the same moment, we have to deal with both at the same time. And the principles are still the same. We should condemn the aggression, but we should also do our best to avoid civilian casualties and to bring the parties to the table as soon as possible.
President Pavel of the Czech Republic, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.